Good morning and a warm welcome to one and all. Today marks the culmination of a string of events that the Department of Economics organized to celebrate its 70-year history. The department is extremely honored and humbled to celebrate this special occasion with an array of luminaries from the field of economics. We will begin today's program with the Tamil Thai Vartha, followed by a prayer song which will be rendered by the college choir. I request all to rise for the Tamil Thai Vartha and the prayer song.
நீராறும் கடலுடுத்த நிலமடந்தை கெழிலொழுகும் சீராறும் மதனமென திகழ்வரத கண்டமிதில் எக்கணமும் அதில் சிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாடும் தக்க சிறு பிறை நுதலும் தரித்தனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிழமை திறம்பியந்து செய்ய மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy grace.
I invite Sister Susan, Secretary of Stella Maris College, to lead us in the opening prayer.
Let's all bow our heads in prayer. Oh God, our Father and Mother, you are the Lord of the universe. You are the source of all wisdom and knowledge. We praise you and we thank you for being with us all the time, showering your choicest blessings upon us. We thank you for gathering us together this morning for the inauguration of this international conference on development in India. Lord, we thank you for the faculty and the students of the Department of Economics who have organized this program. Bless all their efforts. As the department is celebrating its Diamond Jubilee, we recall with gratitude all the founding members of this department, the successive faculty members who followed them, and we thank you also for the generations of students who have passed through this department. Lord, we pray that you continue to bless the department its faculty and its students, so that they will continue the traditions of the college and the department. Pray for all those present here, all the participants who have come for this program from far and wide. We pray for all our the resource persons, that you bless them all as they present their papers. They may truly share all their expertise with our participants, so that all of them may be truly enriched. Continue to bless everyone. Lord, we pray that you continue to shower your choicest blessings upon this conference, so that all the efforts made by the department may be crowned with success. Pray for all the benefactors of our college, all the donors, all the well-wishers, that you continue to bless each and every one. Once again, I beg you to bless this seminar, this conference, all the participants, and all of us present here. We make our prayer in your own precious name. Amen.
Light symbolizes truth and knowledge. I request our guest of honor, Dr. P. Doraisamy, Vice Chancellor, University of Madras, to lead the other dignitaries on stage in lighting the Kuttuvilakku. Thank you all. I invite Dr. Reggie Manimegla, Convener ICDCI 2018 and Head Department of Economics, to welcome the gathering.
Good morning to all of you present here. Guest of honor, Dr. P. Doraisamy, Vice Chancellor, University of Madras, Principal, Sister Jacinta Quadras, Sister Susan, Secretary, Stella Maris College, Sister Dr. Helen Vincent, Director, English Language and Life Skills, Keynote Speaker, Distinguished Speaker, Dr. Shanta Devarajan, Senior Director, Developmental Economics, World Bank. Celebrity speaker, if I'm allowed to call Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. T.N. Srinivasan, Professor Emeritus, International and Area Studies, Yale University. Dr. Deepak Mohanty, Executive Director, Reserve Bank of India, Mumbai. Dr. G.V. Raman, Agricultural Scientist, Executive Director of the Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Hyderabad. Dr. Manabi Majumdar, Director, ICSSR, Eastern Regional Center, Calcutta. Dr. Kalpana Kochar, Director of Human Resources Department, International Monetary Fund. Dr. Jayaranjan, Director, Institute for Development Alternatives, Chennai. Dr. Vinod Thomas, Visiting Professor, National University of Singapore. Dr. Jeffrey Stewart Hammond, Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs, Princeton University. Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, CEO of Pratham Education Foundation and Director of Annual Status of Education Report, ASER Center. Dr. C. Rangarajan, Chairman, Madras School of Economics and former Governor, RBI. Distinguished guests, Thiru R. Veeramani, Chairman, GEM Group of Companies, President, Capexel, Calcutta. Dr. Ulaganayagi Parani, Secretary General, World Tamil Federation, UK. Dr. G. Vishwanathan, Founder and Chancellor, Vellore Institute of Technology, and other distinguished guests. Dr. Rajini, Dr. Agnes Rosario, Dr. Nirmala Kanagraj, Vice Principal, Stella Maris College. Dr. Felbin, Dr. Sister Lourdes Mary, Academic Deans, Stella Maris College. Sister Dr. Nirmala, Miss Mary, Dean of Student Affairs, Stella Maris College. Sister Rosie, Controller of Examinations, Stella Maris College. Dr. Rahana Sabir, Associate Controller of Examinations, Stella Maris College. Dr. Renuka, Dean, Research and International Programs, Stella Maris College. Ms. Shanta Gabriel, Public Relations Officer, Stella Maris College. Ms. Dr. Lima Francis, Commerce and Business Studies, Stella Maris College. Dr. Bernadine, Dean, Planning and Communication, Stella Maris College. Archivist, Dr. Geeta Balachandran. Mrs. Mahalakshmi, Librarian. Mrs. Sarala Vasu, Career Guidance Cell, Stella Maris College. Heads of departments of Stella Maris College. Faculty from other colleges, faculty from Stella Maris College, and ICDCI participants, colleagues, and my dear students, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us at the first International Conference on Developmental Challenges in India. Organized by the Department of Economics, Stella Maris College. To our eminent speakers and delegates who have come from other countries, I bid you a very warm welcome to India. The list of luminaries gracing this occasion is indeed very impressive. I consider this international conference a fitting finale to the glorious 70 years of the economics department. The thematic force of this international conference is on various developmental challenges faced by India that primarily includes poverty and inequality, financial inclusion, sustainable and inclusive economic growth, education, training and skill development, nutrition, health and sanitation, sustainable agriculture, environment and climate change, and women-centric issues. While India is and will continue to be a driver of global growth, growth is divided as a large part of the society is still left behind in progress. It is thus imperative to examine, discuss, dialogue the challenges and opportunities, the strategies, and examine the role of people, private, and the government. We have with us today representatives from the World Bank, Reserve Bank of India, International Monetary Fund, Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR, Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Institute of Development Alternatives, Faculty of Public Policy, Public and International Affairs, and ASER Center to share their experiences as policymakers and development practitioners who will disseminate findings from their research work. I hope this 2 days conference will foster dialogue, promote critical thinking, provide greater avenues for research, and provide practical solutions to contribute in our own little way to India's growth story going forward. That is, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, work productivity and economic growth, improved infrastructure, reduced inequalities, etc. I once again welcome and thank you all for joining us at this first international conference on developmental challenges in India, ICDCI 2018.
It is our custom to welcome our guests with flowers and the traditional ponada. I request Sister Susan to do the honors. I request Sister Susan to honor Dr. P. Duresami, Vice Chancellor, University of Madras, Dr. T.N. Srinivasan, Samuel C. Park, Junior Professor of Economics Emeritus and Professor Emeritus International Area Studies, Yale University. Dr. Shanta Devarajan, Senior Director, Development Economics, World Bank. Thiruveeramani, Chairman, GEM Group of Companies and President, CapExcel, Calcutta. Dr. Reggie Manimegla, Convener ICDCI 2018 and Head Department of Economics, Stella Maris College. I request Dr. Reggie Manimegla to honor Sister Susan, Secretary of Stella Maris College. I request Dr. Millie Nihila, Associate Professor and Head, Center for Women's Studies, to honor Dr. Ulaganayagi Palani, Secretary General, World Tamil Federation, headquartered at New York. I request Dr. Millie Nela also to honor Dr. S. Krishnachand Chordia, founder and head of Jainology, University of Madras. I request Dr. Sister Stella, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to honor Thiru Murali Mahadevan, Managing Director, Sri Krishna Sweets. I request Ms. Jayalakshmi, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to honor Mr. Anthony, Industrialist. I request Ms. Swati, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to honor Mr. Chandrasekhar of Mambalam Builders. We are indeed fortunate to have in our midst this morning an economist of high repute who now leads the University of Madras as its Vice Chancellor, Dr. P. Duraisamy. I invite Ms. Mary, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to introduce Dr. P. Duraisamy, Vice Chancellor, University of Madras, our guest of honor.
Good morning. I deem it an honor and privilege to introduce our esteemed guest of honor, Dr. P. Duraisamy, Vice Chancellor, University of Madras. In a career spanning close to 30 years, Dr. Duraisamy has donned several hats in the fields of teaching, research, and administration. After completing his doctorate in economic science from the University of Paris, he worked as a visiting professor in several French institutions. Dr. Duraisamy then spent 3 years at Yale University as a senior visiting fellow. In 1994-95, he worked as a consultant to the World Bank. Dr. Duraisamy has done collaborative research in some of the best international institutions like Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge, and London School of Economics. Sir has been a member and convener in several national-level committees of the UGC, NAC, MHRD, and the Planning Commission, where he has contributed significantly in shaping the policy environment of this country. He has published more than 70 research articles in reputed international journals and has been a recipient of several awards and honors, including a prize from a Nobel laureate for his PhD thesis work. As a member of the advisory board of this conference, Sir has provided us with valuable suggestions and we owe our gratitude to him. Sir, I request you to now address the gathering.
A very good morning to all of you. Distinguished Professor T.N. Srinivasan, Distinguished Economist Dr. Santa Devarajan, Senior Director, Development Economics, the World Bank, Sister Susan, Secretary, Stella Mary's College, Thiru Veeramani, Dr. J. Reggie Manimegala, Head of the Department of Economics of this college and convener of the conference, Dr. Punitha, Dean of Students Affairs, distinguished invitees, faculty members, research scholars, students, media friends, ladies and gentlemen. I owe a great debt to Professor T.N. Srinivasan. I had the opportunity to visit the Economic Growth Center, Yale University from 1989 to 91 and also again in 2000. So I have learned a lot during my stay at the Economic Growth Center, Yale University. In fact, many of the papers published in the leading journals were written while I was at the Economic Growth Center. So I express my deep gratitude and also thank him for all his support during my stay at Yale University. So it gives me great pleasure to be with you today at the inaugural session of the International Conference on Developmental Challenges in India, organized by the Department of Economics to mark the 70th year of its establishment in this institution. Over this period, the department has made remarkable achievements in training students to meet the labor market requirements of the globalized world. I would like to congratulate the organizers of this conference, especially the head of the Department of Economics, Dr. Reggie Manimegala, for her untiring efforts during the past 1 year. I am delighted to state that Dr. Reggie Manimegala was my PhD student and I have been involved with this conference even before I became the Vice Chancellor of the University of Madras. So at this point, I would like to say that she told me that I will come to this college as Vice Chancellor even before I became the Vice Chancellor. So it has come true now. The Stella Mary's College is an institution of high repute, and in the 7 decades since its inception, the college has dedicated itself to rendering a great service to the cause of higher education of women. From a humble beginning with 32 students in 1947, it has grown to become a large institution with an enrollment of 5,000 students from diverse backgrounds. The college is committed to inclusive education by serving the poor and downtrodden sections of the community. It is well known for its high quality of education, wonderful infrastructure, discipline, and the clean and serene environment. It has been re-accredited by NAAC, a high grade of A+, and which is an endorsement of its high academic standard. It is one of the most highly sought after women's colleges in the city. I am truly impressed by the range of academic, co- and extracurricular activities undertaken by the college. This college not only offers traditional arts and science programs, but also has degree programs in emerging areas like international studies, information technology, bioinformatics, and biotechnology. The curriculum is geared to equip students with the skills that meet the requirements of industry. The overreaching theme of the conference is Developmental Challenges in India. India is a fast-growing economy with impressive achievements in several fronts. Yet, several challenges such as poverty, unemployment, inequality, low skills, productivity, educational attainment, health status, etc. are to be addressed. Of these, education is a key factor, and there will hardly be any disagreement that it is vital for economic and social development. I would like to talk on recent achievements of higher education in making of New India and the contemporary issues facing the sector. This is a topic I have been working for over several decades. The present-day world is primarily knowledge and technology driven, and higher education role in this regard hardly needs to be overemphasized. It is now widely recognized that a high-quality higher education system has a key role to play in enhancing skills, productivity, competitiveness, and nurturing innovations. Advances in technology are aided by institutions of higher learning, which not only help create technology, but also train people to adapt to modern technology. The higher education institutions also generate qualified and a talented pool of teachers, a critical input for providing education at all levels. This, by contributing to formation of human and knowledge capital and achievement in technology, higher education plays a significant part in attaining a country's national development goals, such as productivity of labor, high standards of living, better health, and overall quality of life, higher economic growth, narrowing regional gaps, etc. It is no wonder that promoting higher education is becoming an important policy agenda around the world, and this is reflected in the massive expansion of enrollment in higher education. India is no exception to this trend. One of the major changes taking place in Indian higher education is that in the earlier years, it was supply-driven growth, but now it is more demand-driven. Before I take up the issues relating to higher education, I present a brief overview of the progress of higher education in the post-independence period. I would like to draw your attention to the rapid growth in higher education and privatization that has been taking place in the last quarter of a century. Privatization has nurtured to several issues, and of these, issues pertaining to access and financing assume importance. The two issues are intertwined and need to be thoroughly discussed and debated. I will also address the issues relating to the rationale for cost sharing between the state and the households. Progress of higher education in India. Indian higher education is the second largest in the world, next to China, with USA occupying the third place in terms of student enrollment. The country witnessed a steep increase in the number of higher education institutions and enrollment in the post-independence period. The number of universities increased from 27 in 1950-51 to 864 in 2016-17, and the number of affiliated colleges rose from 578 to 42,322 during the same period. Keeping pace with the increase in institutions, the student enrollment also increased from a meager 0.24 million in 1950-51 to 30.7 million in 2016-17. The higher education sector witnessed a massive expansion with an annual average growth of 8 to 9% from 1995-96 onwards due to liberal policy of privatization. The gross enrollment rate, measured as the percentage of total students in higher education to population in the age group of 18 to 23, which was just 7% in 1995-96, increased to 25% in 2016-17. Our goal is to rise the GER to 30% by 2020. The rapid growth of higher education in the last 2 decades has helped higher education to reach large sections of the society, and now higher education moved from elite to masses. However, it will take a few more years to become universal. The recent developments in technology enabled learning has helped in delivering web-based online courses such as MOOCs through SWAYAM and NPTEL platforms and provide higher education to anyone, anytime, anywhere. Then, the first question is whether the growth in higher education is too much or too little. In absolute terms, the growth of Indian higher education, especially in the past 2 decades, is quite impressive. But let us see where we stand in the global perspective. The share of population, the relevant age group of 18 to 23, the higher education institution in India is far below the world average. For the most recent year, for which data available for many countries, the GER for India is 25%, which despite being closer to the developing countries' average of 26%, is way behind the world average of 32%. India is far below that of Malaysia, 36%, and is just above close to China, where it is 27%. The GER for countries in transition is 57%, while for developed countries it is 76%. The GER is the highest in South Korea, it is 98%, followed by Finland 94% and USA 94%. Other countries displaying high GER are Australia 86%, Russia 76%, UK 62% and France 58%. Although there is an impressive growth of higher education in India, in a comparative perspective, it lags behind many developing and developed countries. The second issue which I would like to talk here is what is the growth pattern of higher education in India. The expansion of higher education is not uniform. During the first 2 decades after independence, that is from 1950-51 to 1970-71, the country witnessed an annual average growth rate of 8 to 9% in higher education institutions and over 6% in enrollment. The expansion has come mainly from public funding, and the main providers were public funded government colleges and universities and fully aided private colleges. There was a slowdown in the growth to 3 to 5% in higher education institutions and 5 to 5.5% in enrollment during 1970-71 to 1995-96. This is perhaps due to financial crunch facing the government, because of which the public spending on higher education is not able to cope with the increase in demand for higher education. The higher education sector was opened up to private sector during early 1990s, and since then there is a rapid expansion of higher education system in the country. A large number of self-financing colleges and self-financing courses in public funded institutions and private deemed and state universities started to emerge in the Indian higher education sector. The massive expansion of higher education in recent years is mainly due to the large-scale participation of the private sector. The share of private unaided colleges increased from 25% in 2001 to 58% in 2012-13. At the same time, that the share of private aided and government colleges declined from 42% to 15% and 33% to 27% respectively. While the number of private aided and unaided colleges accounted for about 76% of the total higher education institutions, the share in total enrollment stands at 62%. Accounting for student enrollment in self-financing courses would show that 3/4 of the enrollments now are in private institutions. Privatization of higher education in India. Privatization of higher education started in the mid-1980s and attained the highest growth during 2000s. The private unaided colleges increased from 25% in 2001 to 61% in 2014-15. So, it is noted that private aided and unaided colleges account for about 73% of the total higher education institutions and 62% of the total enrollment. So, next the issue is the disparity in access to higher education. Although the growth of higher education is impressive and is the welcoming feature, it has led to increase in inequality. The inequality among states has widened over the years. The gender disparity is also quite considerable. That is, the GER of males is 25.4%, while it is only 23.5% for females. Similarly, we also observe the inequality among caste groups. The GER of SCs, scheduled caste, is 19.9% and scheduled tribes is just 14.2%. Both are far below the national average of 24.5%. Another interesting point to note is the gender difference in GER. While the gross enrollment rate in most of the developed countries, excluding South Korea, is in favor of females, it is the other way around in India. The female advantage is the highest in USA, it is 31%, followed by Australia 28%, UK 19%, Russia and Finland 17%, and lowest in France 13%. That is, in these countries, women's enrollment is more than the men's enrollment in higher education institutions. The female disadvantage is also the highest in South Korea, the 28%, while it is about 6% in Malaysia and India, and 3% in China. Thus, India not only has a low GER compared to some of its neighboring countries, but the gender gap is also a matter of concern. The fifth issue I want to talk is on the financing of higher education. Public expenditure has increased from 484 crores in 1980-81 to 36,234 crores in 2012-13. That is 74-fold. But this doesn't match with the surge in enrollment and not keeping up with the inflation. Per student expenditure has declined from rupees 166 to 122 in current prices. Currently, hardly 4% of the GNP is spent on education as a whole, and a meager 0.4% on higher education and 0.1% on technical education. Income from tuition fee constitutes only 2 to 3% of the recurring income of the higher education institutions. Privatization has led to shifting the burden of expenditure from the state to the households, implies only those who can afford to pay can get access to higher education. And what is the way out? Can student loan substitute for public funding? Student loan started in 2001 and the revised guidelines issued in 2004-5. Based on the revised guidelines, reach of student loan is 8.5%, that is 2.5 million out of the about 35 million students in India. So, this student loan cannot be a substitute for public funding. Then the last issue which I want to talk is on the sharing of expenditure by government and the households. Higher education being solely publicly funded or entirely left to private sector is neither feasible nor desirable. However, given the budgetary constraints, the state cannot meet the growing demand for higher education. Hence, it should be partly met by the students and parents. Alternative funding mechanisms through loans, part-time work, etc. need to be explored. A realistic optimum cost sharing formula needs to be worked out to offer practical solution for the issue of financing higher education. To conclude, increased privatization of Indian higher education has raised several issues relating to access and financing. Access to quality higher education and to technical and professional courses for marginalized groups are at risk. Economic burden is quite high for low-income families and students studying in private institutions. Burden of financing is shifted from state to the households. So, what is the solution for this? Sharing the expenditure of higher education by state and the households. So, with this, I conclude my talk and I wish the conference a great success. Thank you once again for the organizers for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your views on higher education. Dr. Sister Jacinta Quadris, Principal, Stella Maris College, and patron of ICDCI, has been a guiding force throughout the organization of this conference. Sister is not here today as she is receiving an award and had to go to Bangalore. We, however, have a small video bite from Sister Principal giving her felicitation address to the department.
Good morning and warm greetings to all of you assembled here for the inauguration of the International Conference on Developmental Challenges in India, organized by the Department of Economics. Let me first express my deep regret that I am not with you today. A prior engagement takes me out of the city for a few days. But rest assured that I am with you in spirit. I am pleased and honored to extend a warm welcome to all the dignitaries on stage. One of the oldest departments of the college, the Department of Economics, celebrates the 70th anniversary of its founding this year. This international conference therefore marks this milestone of the department and promises to be a singular achievement in many ways. The theme of the conference is of great topical interest to us as citizens, and particularly for our young students who are destined to lead our nation in the near future. Critical issues in the education sector, health and sanitation, gender constructs and roles, water scarcity, and urbanization continue to haunt our society. And conferences like this one provide a forum for reflection, debate, ideas, and possibly solutions to these problems. I am pleased to note that a host of luminaries in the field of economics from across the globe has consented to speak at the conference, which promises to be a unique and exciting experience for all participants. I invite the young, eager students of the department to participate with wholehearted enthusiasm and emerge enlightened and ready to take on the challenges of our nation's development with courage and commitment as true Stella Marians. Congratulations to the Department of Economics on their landmark year of service. I congratulate Dr. Rejimagi Manimegale, Head Department of Economics, and the faculty of members of the department for their commitment and hard work in the organization of this singular international conference. I wish you the very best for the conference. I am sure it will be a rich and rewarding experience for everyone present here. May the star of the sea be our constant guide and beacon, leading us onward to new horizons. Thank you and God bless.
This conference would not have been possible without the generous support of our well-wishers. We are happy that a few of our well-wishers and sponsors could be here with us today. I call on two very special well-wishers of this department and conference, Dr. T.N. Srinivasan, Samuel C. Park Junior Professor of Economics Emeritus and Professor Emeritus International and Area Studies, Yale University, and Thiru V. Veeramani, Chairman, GEM Group of Companies and President, Capexcel, Calcutta, to felicitate the department. One of the main issues in economics is the extent to which the government should intervene in the economy. The debate on market failure and the role of the government has in recent years taken on new dimensions. Today, we have the privilege of getting a fresh perspective from Dr. Shanta Devarajan, Senior Director, Development Economics, World Bank. I invite Dr. Hema, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, to introduce Dr. Shanta Devarajan, our keynote speaker.
Good morning. I consider it my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Shanta Devarajan, Senior Director of Development Economics, DEC at the World Bank. Born in Sri Lanka, Dr. Devarajan graduated in mathematics from Princeton University and received his doctorate degree in economics from the University of California, Berkeley. He was on the faculty of Harvard University, John F. Kennedy School of Government, before he joined the World Bank in 1991. Since then, he has been a principal economist and research manager for public economics in the Development Research Group and the chief economist of Human Development Network in the South Asian region and African region. Dr. Devarajan was the director of the World Development Report 2004 titled Making Services Work for the Poor People. A member of the Overseas Development Institutions, Board of Trustees, and the author and co-author of more than 100 publications, Dr. Devarajan's research covers public economics, trade policy, natural resource and environment, and general equilibrium modeling of developing countries. Before taking up his current role, he was the chief economist of the World Bank's Middle East and North African region and researched extensively on the economic cost of war and refugee. After 35 years in the field of development, he has conceived that the solution to improve the lives of poor people lies in reforming policies and institutions. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Devaraj to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
எனக்கு இங்கே வந்து உங்களோட இருக்கிற மெச்ச சந்தோஷம். ஆனால் சின்னதாக இருக்கைக்கே நாங்கள் இலங்கையில் அமெரிக்காட்டு போனோம். அப்போ அவ்வளோ தமிழ் தெரியாது. அப்போ இப்போ இங்கிலீஷில் பேச போகிறேன். It's a great honor to be here and celebrate with you the 70th anniversary of the teaching of economics here at Stella Maris College. I think this is an amazing occasion to look back at how this college and the teaching of economics has evolved, but also an opportunity to look forward to the next 70 years and what we can do as economists, as people, and the future economists can do to improve the welfare of people, particularly poor people in India. So I want to start by just recapping some of the good news that we've heard, and in fact some of the speakers earlier today have been talking about, which is there's no question India has been experiencing rapid economic growth. Among major countries, probably the second fastest growth rate in the world. And thanks to this rapid economic growth, there's been significant reduction in poverty, in income poverty. So the rate of poverty decline has almost doubled since India embarked on this period of rapid economic growth. Now that's the good news. But as many people have already mentioned, there are also some troubling features of this evolution. To begin with, India has some of the highest inequality in the world. This is just one measure, which is the wealth share of the top 1%, is actually the highest among most countries. I mean, you hear about high inequality in the United States and places like that, but actually India is near the top. But even more troubling is the fact that despite this rapid economic growth, we haven't been experiencing what you would call structural transformation. That is the shift of workers moving from low productivity, particularly agriculture, to high productivity manufacturing and services. In fact, the most significant feature of structural transformation is when productivity in agriculture starts increasing. And there again, in India, agricultural productivity is among the lowest on a large sample of countries. So again, despite all this growth, we're not seeing the increase in agricultural productivity. The other is employment. As many of you know, there has been very little growth of employment in the formal sector. Most of the growth in employment has been informal. And in fact, the share of workers in the formal sector in India is one of the lowest in the world, including among low-income countries like Bangladesh and Bhutan. And it actually is even more troubling if you start looking at basic services and how they're going. I think somebody mentioned earlier today, and my good friend Rukmini Banerjee will expand on this, but learning outcomes have been exceptionally low, poor in India. It's actually quite stunning. This year's World Development Report talks about it, that in rural India, 80% of the children could not read a single word in a paragraph. 80% of the children in grade 2 could not read a single word in a paragraph. And 80% of the children in grade 2 could not do a 2-digit subtraction problem. Now, this is very disturbing given that these children are going to school every day. India also suffers from unacceptably high rates of infant mortality, again, near the highest in the world, highest among lower middle income countries in the world. And then the other thing, and again, somebody talked about the scarcity of water. What you are finding is that the quality of water, of drinking water, has actually been going down during this period of growth. The measure is usually whether you have water 24 hours of the day. Because if there's an interruption in the water supply, all sorts of impurities go into it, and then it's very difficult to clean up the water. But you find that the number of hours per day in Chennai, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Vizag, are all declining rather than improving. Now, what I want to try to convince you of today is that all of these problems, all of these things that are preventing India from achieving true economic transformation are man-made. These are all our fault. But they're very difficult to improve upon because they have been captured by politics. And I want to show you that these were perfectly well-intentioned policies that have actually backfired and got us into a situation which is very difficult. And then I'll talk about what things we can do to improve the situation. And I think the students of Stella Maris will be part of that solution. So the basic idea is that back in the 1950s, India introduced a set of policies that were aimed at solving market failures. There was a range of market failures, and therefore government had to intervene to actually correct them. And what do I mean by that? Well, the standard textbook examples are public goods, things like clean air and clean water and so on, or externalities, where if there's pollution, you want to correct for it, or if there are positive externalities, such as education, you want government to intervene because the private market would not achieve the best solution. And I want to include under market failures another part, which is even if markets were working perfectly, you might still think that the distribution of income in society was not as equal as you would like, in which case government then has to intervene in order to redistribute income. So that's another reason why government should intervene. And for all of these reasons, these are perfectly good reasons for governments to intervene. They did intervene and introduce policies. The trouble is these policies, or these market failures, have evolved into what I'm going to call government failures. They've actually ended up making things worse rather than better, and I'll give you 4 reasons why that came to be the case. The first is that sometimes governments intervened to correct a market failure, but then that market failure went away, usually because of technology, because of technological developments. But the intervention remained. And then that actually has become a source of distortion, because now there is no market failure, but you're continuing to subsidize or tax. And as a result, that's actually debilitating the economy. And the example I want to give you is the fertilizer subsidy. Now, the fertilizer subsidy, there was a perfectly good argument for introducing a subsidy on fertilizer back in the 1950s because it was something new. That if it's something new, farmers might be reluctant to, not all farmers may be reluctant to adopt it. So if some farmers can be incentivized to adopt it, then everybody learns from it, and they will then all be able to adopt it. And just the simple framework is that there's a cost to fertilizer. There is a private benefit to fertilizer. Let's not forget that if a farmer does adopt it, their yield will go up. But then, in this case, there's the additional social benefit over and above the private benefit, which is the fact that there's a learning externality, as we call it. It's just that a farmer who adopts it then confers a benefit to all the other farmers because they learn how that farmer does with the fertilizer. So there's a social benefit over and above the private benefit. And if you want to achieve the social optimum, because the market by itself will not achieve it, you need to subsidize it. And that's why they did subsidize. They subsidized fertilizer to the difference between the social and the private marginal benefit. But this was in the 1950s. By 1970, all the farmers had figured out the benefits of fertilizers. And they didn't need that additional inducement to actually adopt fertilizer, because they all knew it. The technology had been adopted. So basically, the social benefit, the additional benefit of a farmer adopting, benefit to others of a farmer adopting fertilizer had gone away. But the subsidy remained. And to this day, it remains. And there you've got a problem, because then the subsidy is a pure distortion. It confers no benefits to society, but it incurs a huge cost. But the trouble is, now that fertilizer is a pure private good, politicians can use it as a way of currying favor with their political constituents. And in particular, in this case, as you can see from the diagram, the two people who benefit the most are the producers of fertilizer, because now it's sold at a price higher than the market price. and the consumers of fertilizer who get it at a lower price than they would otherwise have to pay. And if you can think about it, it's actually the large farmers who benefit the most because they have the biggest use of fertilizer. And this has now become a real problem because you've got a coalition between politicians and elites, the large farmers and the producers of fertilizer, all of whom have an interest in keeping the fertilizer subsidy alive. But this fertilizer subsidy is causing huge damage and is one of the reasons why agricultural productivity isn't growing. The fiscal cost is about $11 billion a year. It's the largest agricultural subsidy there is. And as I said earlier, it's regressive. It actually benefits large farmers more than small farmers. But worse than that, it has actually led to a distortion in the inputs that farmers use because the subsidy only subsidizes urea, and so they use much too much urea versus phosphorus and potassium. And as a result, you actually get crops that are resistant to fertilizer use. So you need to use more and more in order to get the same output. And even worse than that, there's the problem with the runoff of fertilizer through the water. So the fertilizer, the water spills over into the rivers, it destroys plants, people drink the water and they actually have health problems through the eutrophication, and it also can kill the fish. So this fertilizer is actually a negative externality. Instead of subsidizing it, we should be taxing it. But you can't do that at the moment, you can't achieve it, because of this coalition of politicians and producers who will resist attempts to remove the subsidy, much less to tax it. And all of this is due to the fact that a well-intentioned policy that was introduced back in the 1950s was not removed when the reason for the policy was removed. The reason for it went away, but the policy remained. But that's not the only way in which we generate government failures. The other is where there is a genuine market failure that continues to exist, but we chose the wrong instrument to address the problem. And here I want to talk about health. My good friend Jeff Hammer is going to give a talk tomorrow about health in more detail, but I just want to touch on the basic point. Because with health, there are actually two kinds of market failures, if you like. On the one hand, there's the problem with communicable diseases. That's a pure public good. The immunization, or if you drain swamps to remove the malaria, the mosquitoes from malaria, and so on, you're generating a public good. Perfectly good reason for government intervention. But that's only for communicable diseases. The other side is the curative care. You know, when people get sick, or they have a heart attack, or they have diabetes. Now, the curative care is a private good. If I get sick with a heart attack or something, it is I who benefit from the care. There's no spillover to other people. But the problem with things like heart attacks is that you don't know when you're going to get a heart attack. It's highly uncertain. So what you need is some kind of insurance mechanism so that when you are faced with a catastrophic shock, that there will be somebody to pay for it because you've been paying into an insurance scheme. And we know that insurance markets also need some kind of correction because they can fail. But that's a very different type of market failure from the first one, which is the public good. What you need is a regulation of the insurance market with possibly subsidies for poor people so they can afford the insurance premium. But what we did was we combined those two as if they were the same problem, the same market failure, and introduced public provision and public financing of health. And that was a system that was introduced in India of public provision and public financing. And let's look at what happened. This is the distribution of that public financing across households of different income groups. And you find that, if you think that part of the reason why government spends on health is to help poor people, and yet you find that the lion's share of public spending goes to the richest 20% of the population. And you can see by the color scheme that the reason for that is that most of that spending is on hospitals. Now, hospitals serve the purpose of this insurance function. If you have a heart attack, you'd like to be able to go to a hospital. And rich people and poor people alike face the possibility, the uncertain possibility of getting a heart attack. But the problem is that the rich people have more power, political power, so they make sure that those hospitals are located near where they live, should they happen to need it in an emergency, because we haven't developed the insurance market. You can see that the primary health centers, which is a small part of the spending, that is more equally distributed, because that is supposed to help poor people, particularly people in rural areas. But that's where the second problem comes up. In those primary health centers, okay, so they spend it so that the primary health centers are located where poor people live. Unfortunately, frequently the doctor is absent. So the average absentee rate of doctors in India is about 40%, 2 out of 5 days of the week. It varies across states, and it reaches a peak of about 67% in Bihar and places like that. Now, what's going on here? Well, again, it comes to this free public provision of health care. Because health care, as I said earlier, is a private good. So these doctors can make a lot of money in the private sector by running a private practice, because people are willing to pay to be cured. So they don't show up in the public clinic and instead go work in the private clinic. It's actually worse than that, because the doctors, when they are present in the public clinic, now keep in mind, these are qualified MBBS doctors. When they do show up in the public clinic, often give worse service than the unqualified private sector doctors, the so-called quacks. This is some work that Jeff and Jishnu Das have done, which actually compares in Delhi the services provided by qualified public sector doctors with unqualified private sector doctors. And the unqualified private sector doctors, even though they're not as well informed, actually provide better service. And the public sector doctors are basically rushing their patients through so that they can come to the private clinic later on in the day. So this system, by choosing the wrong instrument to solve the market failure, has led to a breakdown in the quality of services. And again, you've got a very powerful coalition of medical unions, the doctors, and some of the high-end, the rich people who can actually afford to go to the private doctors, who actually have an interest in keeping the system as it is. And the people who lose out are the poor. Now, a third set of government failures is where, even if you choose the right instrument, that there is a market failure, you choose the right instrument, you have to keep in mind that it's the public sector that is actually delivering the service. And incentives in the public sector could be very different from incentives in the private sector. And here we come to the education case, because you can say that education is a positive externality, there's a benefit to everybody of having a literate and numerate population. But I would also say that education has the characteristics of a public good, which is sometimes argued in terms of solidarity. If everyone has the same understanding of the state, of citizenship, citizenry, you actually have a better society. So for those reasons, it could make sense to have education, particularly primary education, publicly financed and publicly delivered, which is what they do in many countries. The trouble is, as we saw, these learning outcomes are appallingly low. Right? And remember, these children, I mean, one thing India has succeeded in is enrollment. These children are going to school, practically 100% of them are going to school. But they still don't seem to be learning. Well, why is that? Well, about 25% of the time, the teacher isn't there. Right? The teacher absentee rate is about 25%, ranging from about 15% to about 40% across the different states. And it's again the same thing, because the teacher, the public school teacher, gets paid whether or not he shows up for work. So if they have outside opportunities, they go off and do the outside work, so they get paid twice. But it's actually worse than that. Because as you probably know, in many states, in many parts of India, the teachers run the local elections for the local politician. So the teacher gets the politician elected, the politician turns around and gives the teacher a job for which he doesn't have to show up. So the politician is happy, the teacher is happy. Unfortunately, the poor children are not learning. And we are in that kind of situation. Actually, it's worse than that. There's this very interesting work by Tara Bate that shows that the politicians also use the possibility of transfers to nice areas as a way of getting teachers to work even harder on their political campaigns. So again, it has nothing to do with teacher performance. A teacher could be a very good teacher, but if the teacher, and in fact it works the other way, if a teacher could be a very good teacher, but if the teacher isn't helping with the political campaign, they get transferred to a worse environment. And then finally, oh yeah, just to reinforce that point, actually Karthik Muralidharan and Michael Kramer have this paper where they show that the prevalence of private schools is associated with high teacher absenteeism in public schools. Basically, parents who notice that the teacher isn't there, then again, turn around and send their kids to private schools in villages. So you see this preponderance of private schools. So the whole idea that there's a rationale for public provision and public financing is breaking down because the incentives within the public sector are not ones to deliver that. And then finally, let me turn to the case, which is an extreme case, but unfortunately quite prevalent, which is there was no market failure, but they intervened anyway. And here, let me go back to the case of drinking water. I mean, there's nothing in drinking water that says it's a public good, right? It's almost a classic case of a rival good, right? If I drink a glass of water, none of you can drink it, right? And yet, around India, they have chosen to subsidize water, usually on grounds that you want poor people to get access to water. That water is necessary for life and poor people need it. But by subsidizing it, first of all, you're subsidizing it for everybody, not just the poor. But secondly, it has happened, what we saw, which is the quality of water has been declining. Now, some people say that the reason for the declining quality of water is that the supply of water is declining, that we're running out of water, or these places don't have water. Turns out that's not true. We looked into it where if you look at the availability of water, the red bar on the left measures the amount of water supply, the stock of water, in liters per capita per day in various Indian cities. And the yellow represents the number of hours per day that water is available. And you notice that the number of hours per day seems to have nothing to do with the supply of water. You have Bathinda, the fourth from the bottom, which has 8 hours of water per day at 106 liters per capita. You can go up to Derabasi, which has 173 liters per capita and also has only 8 hours of water per day. And then Goa also has 8 hours of water per day and has 341 liters per capita per day. Right? And Paris, and by the way, Paris is not one of those Indian cities. Paris, which has 24 hours water, has only 150 liters. It's like the median of these Indian cities. What's happening here is that when you subsidize water, somebody has to pay a subsidy to the water utility. And it's basically, that means that the politician gets to choose who gets the water, because the politician is the one who allocates the subsidy to the water utility. And so they manage to make sure that that water goes to places where people would vote for them, their constituency. And sometimes that's not the poor, but as we know, poor people are the ones who are faced with, who need water. I mean, everybody needs water for survival, and so poor people are obliged to buy water from these water tankers at the rate that is about 5 to 16 times the meter rate. So the meter rate is so low, and these poor people are actually paying 5 times that in order to buy water from these water tankers. As somebody once said, it's very expensive being poor. All right. But you can see why it's difficult to break this, because what you're saying is that if you increase the meter rate, if you increase the price of water, you then enable the consumer to decide who gets the water rather than the politician. And you can shift that balance. But it's very difficult to convince somebody that by raising the price of water, you actually make poor people better off. But that actually turns out to be the case. And this cartoon sort of captures it. The politician is saying, elect me and I promise you free water. I guess in Tamil Nadu they'll say free energy too, right? Anyway, we won't go there. But the poor person is saying, we never got your free water, so we'd rather pay for it. Okay, so what I've tried to show you is the problem, which is that these market failures which justified public intervention, perfectly reasonable reason for public intervention, have actually turned into government failures. But these government failures are much more difficult to remove because they represent a political equilibrium. So you've got politicians and elites who have captured the rents accruing from the distortions, especially when the market failure has gone away, and they can be very powerful in resisting the change we need, because we do need to bring about some changes. So what can we do in this situation? Well, if you agree that the problem is political, that it's the behavior of politicians, and in some cases bureaucrats who are aligned with the politicians and the elites, then I think what we have to do, well, first let me just say, what do we normally do? I mean, we at the World Bank, but I think many of you here in India as well, which is that we do research, we do studies, usually with some of those elites, and then we go and present those studies to the politicians and to the bureaucrats and say, here, we're recommending that you remove the fertilizer subsidy, or we liberalize some tariff. Why don't you do it? But you realize you're talking to the person who's the problem. So they're unlikely to adopt your recommendation because they have an incentive to do the opposite. So I think what we have to do is to work at the other end. We have to work with citizens, with ordinary citizens, because they are the losers in this scheme, so that they can change the incentives facing politicians. Now, how can we do that? This is much harder, and the research on this is very imperfect, shall we say. But I want to suggest that there are three broad areas of work that we can do, and this is where we need your help, the students of Stella Maris and the faculty as well. Okay? Because the first is really to change information that poor people have access to. the information that they use. And I want to say, I was struck by this 20 years ago in a famous experiment, a famous study we did in Uganda. We did a study in Uganda where we asked the question, how much of the money that is intended for public primary schools actually arrives at the school? And the answer was 13%. Now, this was horrifying, right? I mean, and that was the average, and some schools got nothing. But what was interesting was that the government of Uganda, with some prodding from the World Bank, I think, publicized this finding. They put it in the newspapers, they put it on the radio, on billboards. And this created a movement. People in the districts kept wanting to know then how much money was coming to their district, and they made sure that the newspaper published it. Every month, the newspaper had to publish how much money was arriving in their district. When they found out how much money was coming to their district, the parents then went to the school principal and said, all right, now we see how much money you're getting. How is it that my kid says there's no textbooks in the classroom, there's no furniture, there's no chalk, and things like that? So now the school had to then publish the budget, how it's spending the money, on the schoolroom door. And to this day, that budget is published on the schoolroom door. And the interesting thing is that figure went from 13% to 90% in 4 years. The second story I wanted to share with you, which also just brought this home to me quite starkly, is I spent a week in Gujarat, in western Gujarat, in the Kutch Desert with a poor woman. This is a village immersion program we had, where I cook with her and do everything that she does. And one day the kid was sick, and she took the kid to the local private doctor and paid for it, and I was convinced the doctor was a quack. So I asked her, why didn't you take the kid to the public clinic? And she looked at me like I was some kind of fool and said, well, the doctor's never there. So then I asked her, why do you think the doctor's never there? And her answer actually spoke volumes to me. She said, oh, it's because the rains didn't come this year. And what it struck me was that when you're poor, life is just terrible. And you associate the fact that the doctor is not there as just some of the bad things about being poor. It's just bad luck, right? Not as a failure of public policy, as actually a failure of the politicians to deliver those services to which she was entitled. So that's when I said, if we can change Champaben's mind with information that this was not because of the rains didn't come, it's because the doctor is in a coalition with the politicians to not be there when he's needed, we might be able to make a change. Now, how do you do this? And that's important because the information, we are all doing research and collecting statistics about public services and everything else, but we have to make sure that this information is salient to those citizens so they can then bring pressure to bear on the politicians. So it has to be timely to the political process, and most importantly, it should be communicated to citizens. It isn't sufficient to just write a paper and put it on the web and hope that the citizens who would have access to it are the ones who could get through to it. And we've done some research to look at how people absorb information. And it's very interesting. They actually absorb it in very different ways across regions. In Africa, for instance, most people get their information from radio, not even newspapers or the internet. It also helps to have a competitive media, free media, something that probably doesn't need repeating, but especially since I live in the United States, this is becoming an issue for us as well. And let me end by saying, let me close this part by talking about one particular case which is happening here in Tamil Nadu, something called a social observatory, which actually tries to elicit from poor people the kinds of questions that they should be surveying in order to do the research. It's a fascinating story. To conclude, just 2 more points, and then we could have a break. But the second point, though, is it's not sufficient just to provide these people with information, even though they may have participated in the generation of that information. That's what this video clip was trying to show. Because when do they have the power to change anything? Do they have the agency to be able to make a shift? And again, there is some evidence that decentralization, particularly the Gram Sabha here in Tamil Nadu, has actually increased the power of poor people to actually influence decisions. And there's some good evidence now with work by Lakshmi Iyer on how when you have increased women's participation in the Gram Sabha, you actually get a better documentation of sexual violence episodes or domestic violence episodes. So there is a way in which you give people more power at the local level, and they can actually use this information to bring about change. I should warn you, though, there's also some papers in the other direction that say that as you get closer, as you decentralize further, it makes it possible for certain ethnic groups to capture and only serve their own constituency as opposed to public goods. So we have to be careful about that. And then finally, let me mention one other thing which is really speculative, but important. Part of the problem with teacher absenteeism or even doctor absenteeism is not just that the doctors are incentivized to work elsewhere, but also it's a simple matter that it has become a norm. It's become acceptable for teachers to be absent in public schools or doctors to be absent in the clinics. And if you really want to bring about change, we need to bring about a shift in norms. We have to go from that situation to a different situation where it's unacceptable for doctors to be absent or teachers to be absent. And it is possible that some policy changes can shift norms. Now, we haven't achieved that with absenteeism, but if you think about, there's these examples from soap operas in Brazil, where people in the soap operas, they introduce questions about fertility reduction, or just basically the value of having smaller families. And that, because soap operas is common knowledge, everybody in Brazil watches them, you actually achieve a shift in norms where people who watch those soap operas, those families were the ones that ended up having smaller and smaller families. So there are ways to shift norms using different techniques like soap operas that we might want to use in terms of the norms associated with teacher absenteeism and doctor absenteeism. So finally, let me conclude by saying that, this all sounds very exciting, to be able to work with citizens, and I hope that some of you will orient your work in this area and to study how providing information to citizens, providing agency to citizens will actually bring about a change and break through this government failures. But we have to keep in mind, these people are very busy. I mean, Champaben, this poor woman in Gujarat that I lived with, she works 16-hour days just to put food on the table and to be able to earn a living. Now we expect them to go to town meetings and listen to us, read our reports, and absorb all of this. We have to keep perspective. And this came home to me in an experiment in Rajasthan. I think Rukmini was involved in this, where they had something called a Village Education Committee, VEC, which was a committee that got some money from the state government, and they could spend it on education activities, curriculum development, and so on. And this program had been going on for 10 years. So this was a program for participation of the villagers in the education community of their schools. And 10 years later, they did a survey where they asked the villagers, have you ever heard of the Village Education Committee? Right, the program has been going on for 10 years, and 94% of them had not heard of the VEC. Now, of the remaining 6%, they asked, so the 6% had said they had heard of the Village Education Committee. They asked them, could you name a single member of the Village Education Committee? And something like 70% of that 6% could not name a single member of the VEC. And this included people who were themselves members of the VEC. So we have to keep this perspective in mind, that we might be overloading the system by our enthusiasm. But nevertheless, I really hope that in the next 70 years of economics at Stella Maris, we will be doing this research and getting poor people access to this information so that they can actually demand what is their due, which is a life free of poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for turning our attention to the nuances of government failure, a valuable input for academicians and policymakers. Thank you, sir. We have compiled a souvenir to commemorate this conference. I request Sister Susan to release the souvenir and hand over the first copy to the Vice Chancellor, Dr. P. Duresami. Thank you, Sister. I call on Dr. Punitha, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, and Dean of Student Affairs, to propose the vote of thanks.
I feel honored and privileged for this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this historic event, the first ever international seminar hosted by the Department of Economics to commemorate and celebrate the completion of 70 great years. We have an enduring principle in Dr. Sister Jacinta Quadras, the patron of the conference, and we owe it all to her. Her unstinting support and encouragement has been our guiding force. We immensely thank Sister for all this. Thank you, Sister, as you are away to receive the award. Special and sincere thanks are due to Sister Susan, Secretary of the College, for her enthusiasm, support, and blessings at all times. Thank you, Sister, for always being there for us. I request Ms. Reggie to do the honors. We are extremely thankful to the management, Sister Christine Superior, and the FMM congregation for their interest in the department's activities. Sister Helen Vincent, former principal and head of the department, whose vision and leadership played an indomitable role in shaping the department to its present stature. On this occasion, we specially thank you, Sister, for advising, motivating, and inspiring us. We wish to convey our deep regards and profusely thank Dr. Dureswamy, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Madras, for gracing the inaugural ceremony and being the guest of honor. Special thanks for being a part of the advisory committee and for your support, sir. Our wholehearted thanks to Dr. Shanta Devarajan of the World Bank for accepting to come over and for delivering the keynote address. Sir, your unassuming demeanor is sure to impress one and all. We are indeed honored by your presence. We are greatly encouraged by the esteemed presence of Dr. Srinivasan, Professor Emeritus, Yale University, whose presence was truly inspiring, and we were eagerly looking forward to his address tomorrow. We would like to place on record and thank Thiru Veeramani, Chairman, GEM Group of Companies, and President, Capexil, Calcutta. We are extremely grateful to all the distinguished delegates and speakers who have come from distant places to participate in this conference, which is reflective of their commitment and interest towards the subject. Dr. Deepak Mohanty of the Reserve Bank of India, Dr. Raghav Das Gaiha, University of Delhi, Dr. G.V. Ramanjaneyu, Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Dr. Kalpana Kochar, IMF, Dr. Jayaranjan, Institute for Development Alternatives, Dr. Mary E. John, Center for Women's Studies, Dr. Ulaganayagi Parani, World Tamil Federation, Dr. Vinod Thomas, National University of Singapore, Dr. Jeffrey Stewart Hammond, Princeton University, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, Pratham Educational Foundation and Director of SS Center, Dr. C. Rangarajan, Chairman, Madras School of Economics and former Governor, Reserve Bank of India, and Dr. G. Vishwanathan, Vice Chancellor, VIT, and President of the Indian Economic Association. We express our appreciation to the distinguished chairpersons for extending their support. Appreciations are due to our peer review team, Dr. Brinda and Dr. Selvaraj, for their time and useful inputs to improve the quality of the papers. We acknowledge with gratitude the financial support provided by our well-wishers. I request Dr. Millie to present a memento to Dr. Ulaganayagi Parani, who deserves special mentions. She was part of our advisory committee and stood by our side constantly. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Millie will also present mementos to Mr. Chandrasekhar of Mambalam Builders, Mr. Anthony, industrialist, Dr. Krishna Chand Chodia of the University of Madras. We would also like to place on record our sincere thanks to Ms. Aarti Krishna of Sundaram Fasteners, Mr. Meera Reddy, Shri T.T. Srinivasa Raghavan, Sundaram Finance, Mr. Vinod Garg of Pulkit T&T Bars, Mr. Subhash Goyal of Goyal Metals Private Limited, Mr. Murli of Sri Krishna Sweets for their hospitality, and I request Ms. Millie to present a memento to Mrs. Paul of Watch of Fine Arts for printing. Thank you. We extend our gratitude to the entire body of the retired faculty. We remember and value their contribution to the department and the conference. We are grateful to the parents, alumni, and well-wishers who have given financial support and encouragement. Thanks are due to Sister Veera Bursa and her team. A special mention of the students and the Chamber of Economics for their dedication, teamwork, and untiring efforts, which has helped make this event a great success. Our sincere thanks to the paper presenters and participants from other colleges and institutions. This is a unique opportunity to learn and share. We thank you for actively participating in this event and being a part of this development narrative. Our special thanks to the heads of the departments, faculty from other colleges and institutions for their immense support and cooperation. We thank the vice principals, the deans, the faculty from other departments for their presence and support. Thanks to the print and electronic media for their presence and coverage. For the support in the provision of in-house facilities and infrastructure, we owe it to Sister Hilda and her team. Thank you. We have reached the end of this beautiful celebration, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank one and all present here and for making this event a memorable one, and hope this paves the way for many more such events which will tie this community and push the dialogue towards development to greater heights. Thank you. Thank you one and all, and have a nice day. We shall rise up for the college song to be followed by the national anthem.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Two very